Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the A segment of episode 2 of The Loud House, Heavy Meddle. We begin this segment at Royal Woods Elementary School, where someone is picking on Lincoln. We don't see who it is, we don't know what they look like, we just see the aftermath of their misdemeanors towards Lincoln, which just boils down to pantsing, tying shoelaces together, whoopee cushions, and a bunch of junk being piled up in the locker and it coming out when it opens. Lincoln is upset about this and he storms off, but then we cut to later on in the day when he's walking home with Clyde, revealing that he intends to give this bully a piece of his mind by asking them to meet him outside his house sometime after school so he can give his strongly worded grievances to them. We then find out that the bully did one other thing to Lincoln: stick gum in his hair with a sticky note that says "Lame-o" on it, but Lincoln's more worried about his sister seeing the gum in his hair, suspecting that they'll meddle and make things worse, as he says they tend to do. Clyde doesn't understand how that is. Lincoln proceeds to tell Clyde and the audience of an example. We see the sisters taking care of Lincoln for what seems to be an illness of some kind, but it ends up causing some problems along the way. Lisa's machine ends up causing more pain to Lincoln. Luna and Luann tying bandages up around him ends up causing him a hard time to breathe until they can find room for his mouth, like leaving open the area where his mouth is. And Lenny brings some chicken noodle soup, but it's still very, very hot. She trips and it falls on, shall we say, a very vulnerable spot, and leave it at that. We then find out all of that was because of a paper cut. After talking to Clyde one last time before heading in, Clyde suggests he get rid of the gum by using smooth peanut butter as opposed to chunky peanut butter. As Lincoln walks into his house, we begin the gag of the segment where he does a weather forecast, hoping to avoid what he calls the dreaded Sisternado. He manages to use stealth and avoids his sister spotting the gum in his hair, but he finds out that the peanut butter jar is empty, and he questions why anyone would leave an empty jar in the fridge, only to end up doing the same thing himself. But then he gets the idea of actually using scissors to remove the gum when he hears Lori say "cut it out" to one of her friends on the phone. He sneaks into the Loud parents' bedroom. It's the only one on the first floor, by the way. And then he heads upstairs to go into his room. But before he can, Mrs. Loud calls out to him. We don't see her, we just hear her voice. She calls Lincoln out to take out the garbage. He says he will in 5 minutes, but she is impatient and demands he do it right this second. Lincoln tries to haggle for 3 minutes, but Mr. Loud, again like Mrs. Loud, we don't see him, we just hear his voice, demands that Lincoln do as his mother asks. Annoyed, Lincoln does so, and then he has to put a trash can lid on his head to avoid Lenny seeing it as she walks down to ask if the desk lamp is down there. And he says that maybe it's still on the desk. When Lenny questions about the lid on his head, he just passes it off as the latest fashion trend and then heads back to his room. But we see Lenny gets an idea from this. As he makes it to his room, Lisa spots him before he can actually get inside and pieces together that someone is picking on him because of the gum in his hair. Lincoln begs his prodigy sister not to tell the rest of them, but Lisa's answer seems to suggest that she has no intention to do so. Thinking he's in the clear, Lincoln gets into his room, cuts the gum out of his hair, and he's about to get rid of it until he hears a lot of noise outside. Lynn kicks the door open and is leading a charge with the rest of the Loud sisters, revealing that they know he's being picked on. Lincoln is upset about this, But Lisa clarifies that she meant she had no room in her brain for his secrets, so she transferred it to Lynn, who she said had a lot of room in her brain. Lynn takes this as a compliment at first, but then takes this as an insult. And Lincoln tries to pass the gum off as just his own, but that doesn't work either. And he tries again, begging them not to involve themselves as they'll only make it worse, but they insist that they'll make it better with their involvement. We get a whole series of suggestions about what to do about the bully. The first one, from Lola of all people, is actually the most practical. Tell the principal about it. But the rest of the sisters think that's too good for this bully. Lynn eventually ends up pulling in a boy and believes this to be the bully, and the other sisters criticize him for picking on Lincoln because they say only they get to pick on their brother. We also find out Lana's been chewing on the gum that was in Lincoln's hair. And she suggests that he put it in the boy's hair in retaliation. But Lincoln says this boy is not the one picking on him, but he's probably going to have to deal with trouble from him now thanks to their meddling. With their foots in their mouths, the sisters get rid of the boy, and Lynn intends to find another one. But she stops when Lincoln says it's not a boy picking on him. Lenny, being Lenny, thinks that it's a dog, but Lincoln clarifies that it's really a girl. This leads all the Loud sisters, yes, even Lisa, who even admits she's not usually one to express emotions, to squeal and hug Lincoln, suspecting that the girl is picking on Lincoln because she actually likes him. Lincoln doesn't understand why this would be the case, but they seem to be certain that it is the case. And they even formed the sister NATO on the stance that Lincoln should kiss the girl. Lincoln takes refuge in the bathroom and talks to Clyde via walkie-talkie to catch him up to speed about this. Clyde thinks that maybe there's some merit to the sisters' points, since he thinks that it makes sense for girls to know how a girl might think. Lincoln's not entirely convinced, but then slowly considers maybe there is some merit to it, and then eventually decides to go through with his sister's idea for it. They all cheer him on as he heads outside, and Lenny even is wearing a trash can lid on her head, having fallen for the latest fashion trend statement Lincoln made. Now, at this point, we don't see the girl still, we don't see this bully, and we don't see Lincoln either. What we see is the Loud sisters looking outside the window. And they have smiles on their faces, and they awe as they hear the kiss sound, but then they grimace when they hear the punch sound. Lincoln comes in with a black eye, and he storms upstairs as his sisters attempt to apologize and try to offer their help again. But Lincoln silences them as he reaches the top of the stairs, demands they not meddle in his affairs, and storms into his room. After some grumbling about his sister some more, he hears a whistle outside. He looks out the window, and a rock gets tossed into his room. It has a note from the bully, actually, the girl bully, and she says sorry. She's actually apologizing to Lincoln, and even gives him her phone number, asking that he text her sometime. Baffled by this, he looks outside the window again, and another rock gets tossed in. This one has a note and a stake. The note mentions that the stake is to heal his eye, and it has X's and O's on it, signs of affection, and it reveals the first and middle name of this girl, Ronnie Anne. Lincoln concedes that maybe his sisters can be right from time to time, but he asks us not to tell them that, and the segment ends there. So going by production order, this would be the first segment that I've noticed seems to be a base breaker among some fans, and we'll get to why in a moment. First, I'm going to delve into a little more about what I think about the segment overall, and to be honest, I actually like the segment a lot. And my main reason for liking it is because it portrays Lincoln and the Loud sisters all in a sympathetic light. there are some fans, I've noticed some people had accused Lincoln of being ungrateful for not wanting his sisters to help. But I do think his point was valid that their meddling can make things worse. And I don't think he was calling them bad people, just saying that their intentions can fall flat. And I think he's right. There's merit to what he's saying. And I say this from personal experience myself. I've had my share of dealing with meddling relatives that stick their spoons in my bowl of cereal. And I'm not calling them bad people by any means, not saying they're personally bad, but I get it. They mean well, they have their hearts in the right place, but sometimes their methods just don't land, and that can range from them maybe not just fully understanding the situation as well as they think they do, or they're trying to impose their way of doing it because it worked for them, and not considering that maybe just because that method worked for them doesn't mean it's the best course of action for everyone. And again, that's not out of ill will. That's not saying they're horrible people by anything. It's just they can sometimes have the route of thinking they know better than they really do. And that's not always out of, that doesn't come from a bad place all the time, but sometimes it's just, they're well-meaning, but they're clouded by their good intentions cloud the potential problems of what their methods may cause. And that's what I feel was the case with what Lincoln was getting at. And with the Loud Sisters, I did like that it portrayed them in a good light, because they really did mean well, and that was great. But at the same time, their methods did cause Lincoln a bit more grief than they could have been avoided. But it didn't say that the Loud Sisters were bad people, or it didn't portray them as being malice or trying to get back at Lincoln or anything like that. It was just, yeah, they wanted to help their brother that they care about, but their way of doing it just ended up causing more harm than they meant to. And I liked that because I've mentioned this before in previous videos, but certain segments have given the Loud Sisters a very bad reputation among fans because admittedly they have done some pretty bad actions and gotten away with it without really paying the price for it in certain segments, and that didn't really make them well received by some viewers. So the fact that we actually had a segment that showed them that, yes, they can get away with some pretty bad stuff from time to time, but they're not personified evil. They do honestly care about their brother. They do want to help him. That was nice. I liked that. It's because that's what I'm saying. Like, yes, I do think we should acknowledge when the Loud Sisters, or Lincoln for that matter, are in the wrong, but we shouldn't take it too far and act like they're irredeemable monsters who can never do right. We should also recognize they can have their moments of kindness, and they can have good moments, and they should be recognized. And that's what I liked about the segment was the Loud Sisters did end up causing Lincoln some trouble, but it wasn't out of mean-spirited reasons. It wasn't out of ill will. It was just, falling flat for when they meant well. And that's what I think we should see more of, is showing that, we should recognize that the Loud Sisters are good people at heart, even if sometimes they have some very unflattering qualities to them from time to time that paint them in a bad light. We shouldn't forget or ignore that they do have their flattering qualities. They do have good moments to them. They are good people at heart. So, I essentially liked how all the Loud siblings were portrayed in a good light in this segment. And it especially stands out to me because there is going to be a later segment which reverses the role of Lincoln and the Loud siblings when it comes to meddling in affairs or sticking their nose when they shouldn't. But I feel that later segment was not well executed, while I feel this was well executed. And we'll cross that bridge with that segment when we get to it. Now, as for the part about why people have mixed feelings about this segment, or why some like it but some don't like it, or the reason why some don't like it is, well, Ronnie Anne's first impression, we'll say. This was her first technical appearance. I say that because she did technically appear in the segment, even though we didn't actually see her. But essentially, as you can probably guess, Ronnie Anne is following the example of some other Nickelodeon characters. The Helga Pataki to Lincoln's Arnold Shortman, the Cindy Vortex to Lincoln's Jimmy Neutron. What they all have in common is that they are loving bullies, people who pick on someone because they actually like them. And, well, the loving bully trope has not been well received by some, more so as of late. And the thing is, I do understand why it's not everyone's favorite trope, but at the same time, I feel like people are just, they just don't like it simply because they don't like the trope and not really paying attention to how it's executed, or they're not recognizing how it was executed. It's just, oh, loving bully trope, I don't like this at all, instead of saying, well, okay, did they execute it well? Because, like, there are tropes I'm not too fond of. You'll actually hear about them in some later videos, but I can still take a moment to at least put that aside and say, well, did they execute it well? No? Okay, yeah, that's why I'm not too fond of that. Or, okay, this is better executed than usual, but maybe still not quite the best, or this was actually well executed. And I think that would reaffirm that I don't think a trope in general is inherently good or bad. It's more about how you execute it. And I suppose you could say that's the reason I personally don't have much of an issue with the loving bully trope, is because most of the examples I've seen of it were well executed examples that didn't make it seem like it was good that it happened, just more like this is why it happens. Like, Helga's a good example of that. I don't feel Hey Arnold was saying it was okay for Helga to pick on Arnold because she actually liked him. It was more, this is why Helga picks on Arnold. It's not a good thing. You shouldn't do that, but this is why she does it. This is why it happens. And that's partially also why, is because, in all fairness, the idea of someone picking on someone that they like does happen in real life. And again, that's not saying it's good to do that. You shouldn't. Ideally, you shouldn't. But it can happen, and the reasons for that can vary. Like, some just don't honestly comprehend the consequences of their actions. Some may have had a not so ideal home life, which gave them a distorted view on showing affection, or just a phase that you grow out of over time. And that's what I'm getting at, is like, the loving bully trope wasn't made up for fiction. It has a basis to it in real life, and I can attest to that. It definitely happened at my elementary school, and even as late as my middle school, I had seen cases of people picking on someone that they actually liked. And again, it wasn't always a girl picking on a boy that she liked. Sometimes it was a boy picking on a girl that he liked. And sometimes there were just cases where it was someone just being a jerk. They were just a bully to be a jerk. And yeah, there were some girls that picked on a boy just because they were jerks, or some boys who picked on some girls because they were jerks. That's the point I'm trying to get at, is the reasons why people bully others is not always cut and dry, or it's not the same all around. It's a case-by-case scenario depending on the individual. And while the act of bullying is bad, you shouldn't bully, but I think some people, while well-meaning and trying to stop bullying, go too far and just act like all bullies are irredeemable, personified evil. They're just monsters who can't learn their lesson. And I think that's problematic too. Because some really aren't just doing it just to be jerks. There could be more to it than what the surface suggests. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is you can point out that an action is bad without trying to vilify a person, because sometimes it can backfire and lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy where someone ends up becoming bad because they're only treated as bad. A case of, then let me be evil, if you will. And that isn't a good thing. And what I'm trying to get at with Ronnie Anne here is, back when Heavy Meddle was Ronnie Anne's only appearance, a lot of people were quick to just assume the worst about her. And when the truth of the matter is, it's not enough to make a fair evaluation of what kind of person or character Ronnie Anne is. And that's why it especially stood out, because shortly after the segment premiered, Nickelodeon had revealed what Ronnie Anne would look like, who would be playing Ronnie Anne, and revealed her connection to another character. And we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But that told me, okay, Ronnie Anne's just not a one-time character. They're going to do more with her. And while Loud House is mostly an episodic series, this gave me the impression there were going to be some serialized aspects to it. And true enough, Ronnie Anne's appearances are one of, if not the best examples of the serialized aspects of the series. So what I'm getting at is, Ronnie Anne's appearances are best viewed as pieces of a bigger puzzle, with Heavy Meddle being the first piece. Ronnie Anne got off on the wrong foot with Lincoln here, and yeah, it wasn't the right way to express her feelings, but that's not all there is to Ronnie Anne, and we will get to see more of her in the future. So if this is your first time seeing it, and this is your first exposure to Ronnie Anne, all I'm asking is, don't jump the gun about her just yet. Actually see her other appearances and see how we learn more about her over the course of the series, and make a fair point there. I say that too because some people were judging her compared to Helga, who already had an entire series, and we're getting that Jungle movie soon, so there's still more for Helga to cover. But it's not a fair... What I'm saying is, it's not fair to compare one appearance for a character to an entire series worth of appearances for another character. And that's why I don't personally have a problem with the segment. Also is because I was willing to see where they were going to go with Ronnie Anne's character, and I think they did well. I do think it was a well-executed example, and we will get to that as we get to more of Ronnie Anne's future appearances. I realize that was quite lengthy, but there was definitely a lot to say about this segment, but we're done for today, and we'll cover the B segment tomorrow. Take care, and until next time.